In Isaiah chapter 9, the prophet Isaiah is writing to people in his day. He is writing about things that are difficult, things that are hard, things that are bad that are coming on his people, and yet he writes to them about great hope. He writes to them about great hope. And that got me thinking, what are you hoping for this Christmas? What are you hoping for? Maybe some of you have made a Christmas list full of all the things that you hope for. Maybe it's filled with toys or books, or maybe it's time with family. Maybe it's not so much of a list as it is just something that you're hoping in your own mind, in your own heart. People that you hope to see, things that you hope happen, traditions that you hope you get to participate in again. These are all good things to hope for. I think they're all wonderful blessings, and we have a lot of hopes this time of year. I certainly hope to spend a lot of time with family. I hope that we will be able to participate in family traditions. You might even be able to hear from my voice. I hope that this cold will go away. I know that's the same for many of you out there this morning. This time of year, we often have a lot of hopes in our minds. On some level, we are all hoping for something, and yet I think that we could say that there is a greater hope that we all have than whatever comes to our mind first when we talk about hopes. It doesn't belittle our regular hopes. They're all very real, and some of our hopes are very deep. We might have a deep longing for health or for family. But the ultimate hope that every person holds is actually the same hope. I'm not even just saying that among Christians or among the church. The hope that deep down every person in the world shares is the hope that everything sad will one day be untrue. Every wrong will be made right. Everything will be just as it is supposed to be. That's the one hope that we all share. Every person in the world recognizes that not everything is the way that it should be. Not everything is as good as it ought to be. We are all hoping that one day everything will be made right. This is the hope, the deep longing of our souls that Isaiah is writing about. So would you read along with me, follow along as I read from Isaiah chapter 9, verses 1 through 7. But there will be no gloom for her who was in anguish. In the former time he brought into contempt the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. But in the latter time he has made glorious the way of the sea, the land beyond the Jordan, Galilee of the nations. The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who dwelt in a land of deep darkness, on them has light shone. You have multiplied the nation. You have increased its joy. They rejoice before you as with joy at the harvest, as they are glad when they divide the spoil. For the yoke of his burden and the staff for his shoulder, the rod for his oppressor, you have broken as on the day of Midian. For every boot of the tramping warrior in battle tumult, and every garment rolled in blood will be burned as fuel for the fire. For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and of peace there will be no end on the throne of David and over his kingdom, to establish it and to uphold it with justice and with righteousness from this time forth and forevermore. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will do this. This passage is one that I'm sure that you are familiar with. It is one that is read every Christmas time. It is one that we look at throughout the ages. To us a child is born, a son is given. In Isaiah's day, the nation of Israel was facing what can only be described as annihilation and exile. They were in a land and a time of deep darkness. And what we see, first of all, in these first 5 verses, as Isaiah walks through this passage, is we see that there is hope in the midst of darkness. There is the hope of light, that it will shine into the dark days that they were living in. The people of Israel had disobeyed the word of the Lord, and they were staring down the promised consequences of their unbelief. And yet in the midst of their great distress and their time of darkness, God comes and He gives them hope. There's 2 ways that we are going to be looking at God giving hope to His people this morning. One is this light in the darkness. As with so much of prophecy in the Bible, there are double meanings throughout. There are double meanings present in the text. And so we don't want to lose sight of either one of the things that God is saying. I think sometimes as Western thinkers, as people who are products of our time and our culture, we read a lot of things, and the way that we read, we tend to read as an either or. Either this was written for the people of Israel 3,000 years ago, or this was written for us. And sometimes that's really not the way that we should approach this kind of literature. When we come to look at the prophets, there are so many things that kind of get jumbled up and mixed together. It's one message, but there is a both and, not an either or way of reading the text. Sometimes when we come to these passages, we look at this and we say, well, the people of Israel were in a time of deep darkness, and so that must have been for them. And yet we're also able to look, and we're able to see later on in the New Testament that these things are fulfilled in Jesus Christ hundreds of years later. And even now we could look, and we can look in our world, we could look in our own lives, and we could see that actually we're still living in darkness today. The people of Israel were certainly in a dark time, a time of deep distress and gloom, as it was. They were anguished because they were facing this national extermination. They were facing slavery at the hands of the Assyrian Empire. Isaiah is writing to people who faced very real threats. They needed a light. They needed hope. They needed something to hold on to in the face of the dark days that they were living in. So God comes and He gives them this hope. He gives them this hope of light in the darkness and the promise of salvation, that if they would turn to Him, to trust Him, to save and not trust their own armies, not trust their own kings or their own policies, but they trusted God, then God Himself will save them from their distress. This is God's promise to them. And what we actually know from history is that this comes true. The people do turn to the Lord. The king at the time and his people, the people of Israel, they turn to the Lord and He delivers them from the oppression of Assyria. There is a very real and very immediate fulfillment of this prophecy in Isaiah's day. It lasts for a little while until eventually, because of their own continuing sin and rebellion against God, they eventually are overtaken and taken into captivity. But for a time, God restores them and brings them this hope. Eventually, it's not Assyria that overcomes the people that Isaiah is prophesying to. It is a different nation, the nation of Babylon, some years later. But God provided the people a light, a hope of salvation, and He proved faithful to deliver them out of their present darkness. This is part of the hope that we see in this passage. That God will deliver His people from what is facing them, the oppression and the suffering that they face on a daily basis. But that's not the only thing that is being promised here. The increased joy and the rejoicing the joy at the harvest, the joy of being with the Lord, this great hope is one that still has a future fulfillment. God, by making this prophecy and making this promise to the nation of Israel, He did not say to them really that He would deliver them out of every trial and out of every difficult situation, and they would never have to worry about anything ever again. But He did promise a light to those who dwell in darkness. And the greater fulfillment that we come to see in Jesus Christ, we come to see that by Jesus Christ coming to the world, that this light has come into the darkness, and the darkness has not overwhelmed it. We read in John chapter 1. The spiritual light that comes through Jesus Christ is an even greater light than what the people of Isaiah 9 had to hope in. The spiritual darkness of all people who live in this dark world. We live still in a dark world. This is our greatest need. There are many things that we could think of that we need. There are many things that we think of that make the world around us seem dark. What I'm saying is not to lessen those physical or emotional needs that we have, but I think it can help us keep them in perspective. If this life is all that there is, then our physical and emotional comfort would be the most important things for God to heal for us. But there is a reality that this life is a moment compared to the eternity that God has created us to live into. It is an important moment, one that matters to God, and all that we experience and the life that we have here is important to God. God cares about what we are going through, but this moment of life that we have compared with eternity, we need the light of life for all of eternity, not just for the current circumstances that we find ourselves in. The current darkness that we face in this life, we cry out to God for light and for hope in the midst of it. But the hope that comes, the hope that is truly promised here, is the hope of salvation. Salvation of our souls, not just the circumstances that we face. In the situation that Isaiah was prophesying into, God gave the light in darkness that Israel was facing, but He was also preparing them to see the greater salvation, the greater darkness that was beyond their physical sight. And this is the hope. This is the real light that shines in the darkness. The light of salvation has come to all people. This phrase is amazing. Because think about what is being said here in Isaiah chapter 9. The people are facing a difficult and dark day. And yet the salvation that's promised is not only for them, but it is also for Galilee of the nations. It is a light for all people. The hope that Isaiah is prophesying about here is not just for the nation of Israel, but it is for all of God's people. That anyone who comes to see this light, their sorrow will be turned to joy, their war turned to peace, their burden will be turned into gladness. This is the promise of a coming salvation that is our real hope just as much as it was in Isaiah's day. That God will not leave us to face the darkness of this life. And not only that, He will not leave us to face the darkness of death and hell. But He will send His light into the world so that we can see and we can be warmed by it to our salvation. This is what the people of Isaiah's day were waiting for. We read this passage in Titus chapter 2, that talked about this for us, that the salvation that God had promised has appeared, and yet we now live still waiting to see that blessed hope, the appearing of our Lord Jesus a second time. Salvation has come, and yet we still live in this time of waiting for our hope to be fulfilled. The light of salvation has come for our souls, even though we haven't experienced it in its fullness yet. We are like these people who are living in darkness, and yet the light has dawned because Jesus Christ has come. The question that I think should come to our minds, if we're being very careful and we're not just jumping to conclusions, the question that should come to mind is, how has this light come? How has this hope dawned for God's people? The answer comes from verses 6 and 7. For to us a child is born, to us a son is given. The birth of a son. The hope of eternal life in the Son. That's how this hope of light in the darkness is revealed. The everlasting Son, Jesus Christ. This is not a general promise that God is making through Isaiah. He is continuing His promise that a son would be born. This is not new to the people of Israel, the seed, the offspring. This goes all the way back to Genesis chapter 3, that the seed of the woman would crush the head of the serpent. It goes back to Genesis chapters 12 and 15, where Abraham is promised an offspring by whom all the nations of the earth would be blessed. This son, this one who would be born. God has kept all of His promises to Israel. He has been keeping His promises throughout history. And here He is just extending this promise, making it clearer in Isaiah's day than it was before. It's not just an offspring. It is a specific one who is going to be born. It's not just a king. It is a specific king that is going to come. God swore to David in 2 Samuel 7 that his heir would sit on the throne forever. But Solomon was not the answer to that promise. And after him, each of the kings seemed to get worse and worse. David's heirs were not successful. The kingdom was divided, and only a remnant remained with his sons and grandsons and future generations. But in Isaiah 9, one of the things that we see here is God reaffirming the promise that He had made hundreds of years before. A son is going to be given, a child will be born who will rule. This is not unexpected, it is expected. But thinking about the time that this is being made, this is in Israel's darkest days as a nation. They really don't have hope that their kings will continue. They don't have hope that God's people will continue. And so God comes and He provides this hope of a child, a hope of a son who will be born. And think about the title that He is given. His name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. That's quite a name, quite a title. It is not an ordinary title, at least not for Israel. There were, of course, many cultures whose kings and rulers were considered gods in some way, but this was very specifically not the case in Israel. The king of Israel was never called a god, because there is only one God. There is only one true king, and it is God Himself. So never in Israel was the king confused with or worshipped as the mighty God or the everlasting Father. This baby that God is promising is simultaneously a perfectly ordinary one that people had been waiting and expecting, but he's also at the same time anything but ordinary. This child is a paradox. Just think about these statements that are made about this one who was coming to bring light. He is mighty God, and he is a baby. He is a child, and he is the wonderful counselor, filled with wisdom and knowledge. He is the everlasting God, the everlasting Father, and a Son. None of these things seem to go together, and yet they're all said in the same verse. I think we are meant to wonder at this. Not just to simply say, yeah, we know, we've studied Jesus before, we know that he's both God and man. This is amazing. This is astounding. These are not things that we can really fully wrap our minds around. This one who is promised, this one who is coming, this child, is going to be an ordinary baby who is also the God of the universe. That doesn't seem possible to us. He's going to be the King of Kings, yet born of Mary. Mary, who is poor and betrothed and of no account. One of the songs that we will be singing, not today, but this Christmas season, says he is the source and ending of all things. And yet he was carried to full term by a virgin. There are times that I have talked to people who are not Christians, and my way of thinking, I want to say to them, how is it that you don't understand? How can you not believe? It seems so obvious to me. And then I read verses like this, and I think, well, actually it kind of makes sense. What we're telling people is not possible to fully comprehend without faith, without believing God and taking him at his word. The Apostle Paul says in 1 Corinthians chapter 1 that what we preach is foolishness to those who do not know God. But God has taken what is foolish in this world and he has declared it to be wisdom. And so these things that are stumbling blocks and crazy talk to modern ears are the very things that God has used to bring about salvation and redemption. So Isaiah can write this wonderfully paradoxical verse that takes on great significance at the birth of Jesus. The mighty God will be born as a true human baby. This is what we celebrate at Christmas. This is why this is such an important holiday for Christians, because the birth of Christ is the fulfillment of millennia of prophecy that a son would be born. And Isaiah gives us the description of this son, a child who is God himself, who will sit on the throne of David, fulfilling the promises made by God earlier in the Bible. And not only will he sit on the throne, but he will establish his kingdom forever. His kingdom will have no end. His kingdom will be full of justice and righteousness. This child who would be born is to be the King of Kings and to reign in perfect justice and righteousness for all of eternity. This is the hope that we have. This is the hope that guides our lives, that we hold on to even when things get dark. That God has fulfilled his promise and he has sent us this child, and even now he is establishing his kingdom. And that one day his enemies of death and sin will be no more. And there will only be justice and righteousness with the King. This is the light that breaks into the darkness of our world. This is the hope that we hold on to as His people. It's why Christmas itself, the whole Christmas season, is a time of hope. Because it's Jesus who was born over 2,000 years ago, and He was born as this child who was promised. He is Emmanuel, which means God with us. He is God of God. He is light of light. He is born of the woman to crush the head of the serpent and to bring the knowledge and the light of salvation to the whole world. This is what gives us hope, because we can look at the world around us and we can look at our own lives and we can be surrounded by darkness. And yet, a light shines in the darkness. And the darkness shall not overcome it. We see that we do wrong things. We see that others do wrong things. We see and we hear about evil that is in the world, the deep darkness that our world has fallen into. It would be truly dark if we were left to grope around and to figure things out on our own. There would be nothing but gloom if we had to do it all ourselves and find a way to save ourselves. How many people, how many countries have tried to do that and have failed? But even if it doesn't make total sense in our minds, even if we can't wrap our minds around the great mystery of God and man joined together in one person, Jesus Christ, yet it still brings us hope. A hope that one who is greater and wiser than us has promised to bring light into this dark world, and He has followed through by sending Jesus for us. And so we can continue to have hope because He has promised to come back again. Christmas is not just hopeful for people who are living before Jesus was born, and now that it's happened, we see everything with our eyes. It is still a time of hope for us. That the light of the world who shines in darkness and the darkness has not overcome it, He will come back and He will take every tear and every hurt away. He will make us whole. He will put an end to war. And His government will increase until there is no evil left. That's not going to be accomplished by us. It is to be accomplished by Him. We will live with Him in peace forevermore. This is the hope of Christmas. That God has sent His Son, and that He will come back and make everything sad come untrue. Everything wrong will be made right. The great hope that we have at Christmas is that God has sent His Son to be the light of the world. That He will return for His own. The Christmas season, it is easy to be reminded of that. We ought not to forget about this hope throughout the rest of the year either, though. We are reminded of it, especially at Christmas, but this is a hope that we can hold on to all year long. Every day of the year, God has sent His Son to be the light of the world, to bring salvation to those who put their faith in Him. And our great hope is that He has not left us alone, but that we will be with Him in His kingdom of justice and righteousness forever when He returns. That's our hope. That is the truth that we must hold on to today and every day. Let's pray.